I'm Brian Erickson, and this is Joel Moore. We're the brewers at Bohemian Brewery. Bohemian itself has been around since 2001. It opened right before the Olympics. Bohemian was started by the Petrus family, who immigrated from Czechoslovakia in the early 80s. Eventually bought the Bohemian Brewery, which had been several breweries in the past, turned it into what is now the Bohemian. The owners originally came from the Czech Republic, and this is kind of the idea behind Bohemian. We brew predominantly Czech or German style lager beer. People from the Czech Republic, among other things, are very famous for developing, not solely, but being instrumental in developing what we now refer to as lager beer. Beer is a drink, but it's much more than that. Every single beer tells a story. Every beer that there is comes from a time and a place and a culture and a people. We can kind of start explaining the brewing process. You've got the core ingredients of beer, are malted barley, water, yeast, and hops for the most part. Being the Czech brewery or the German brewery and wanting to brew the beers which represent that part of the world, we choose to move a bulk of our ingredients from that part of the world. So we do take the time and spend the money to buy hops which are grown in Europe so that we get the authentic flavor. Use German barleys. This is one of those things in brewing that you can cut corners on ingredients. Our theory of Bohemian is if you polish a turd, it's still a turd. We just think you can't take bad ingredients and turn them into a great beer. When we start the brewing process, what we're trying to do is convert the starch, which comes in the grain, into simple sugars. So the first step of the process is milling the grain in. We start and take the barley, put it through our mill, which kind of gently crushes the husk, then add it to the hot water. This is kind of the second step of the process, and it's what we call the mash. The mash is maybe where Bohemian gets interesting or what makes it unique. We do a lengthy process called the double decoction mash.
We're taking the grains and the water at one low temp, separating them, heating them, recombining. Each time you heat and recombine, you're jumping the temperature up
to a point where all activity stops, and then we're just going to extract the liquid. And the liquid is what we need for beer.
We still do it because we think it makes our beer the best it can possibly be.
Arguably the most important ingredient to beer is the yeast. The real magic happens in the fermenter, and this is where the fourth and final ingredient comes in. It's the most important factor in a beer, and it has a lot to do with the flavor. The yeast are what metabolize the sugars that we created in the brew house and turn our wort into beer.
Our fermentation takes place at a cooler temperature. So we ferment at 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and it spends about 14 days in that fermenter to finish up. We move it into a lager tank. A lager, it means to store, and we store the beer a minimum of 30 days in the lager tank. When we talk about a lager beer being a real clean, crisp flavored beer, it's because those yeasts have had extra time to work on that beer.
What would you rather see? Go to Paris and see the Eiffel Tower, or go to Vegas and see a shitty copy?
It's always better to get the real thing from the source and keep it local. It's not the same to drink somebody's representation of something.
Yeah, I think it's real important to support your local brewery. The more you support your local artisan and get it, then the better off you are, because you know where it came from, you know what went into it, who went into it, how it was done. The world's trying to take these things away from us, and $1 is a vote, and you got to choose to support the things that matter to you, and basically have to pay for the things that are done the way you want them done. And beer's a great example of a product that drive you to constantly find better beer, make a better beer, be the better brewery.